But yeah, anyway, Battletech beta. So what I might do while I'm doing this is a little bit more on the lore stuff I've been doing. So this is a little bit more ad hoc than what I'd normally do. But when I last left the lore stuff, I said I was going to talk a little bit about the Age of War. Now, the Age of War is a period before is basically the period from 2100 through to the formation of the Star League in about 2550, somewhere around there. I'll double check the dates in a moment. But we also have two periods in there. So we have the actual Age of War, which is the section that we can basically play in, but then you have the pre-Age of War, which is the period from 2100 to 2235 or thereabouts. Oh, correction, actually it's a little bit longer than that, but you can really start playing at about the Outer Reach Rebellion. The big thing that happened though is, we'll start this loading. That between 2100 and 2235 we have two major events happen. One is the invention of the Kearney-Fashida drive, or the KF drive as most people would know it, which allowed the punching of hyperspace and for ships to travel the great distances between one star system to another. The first project around that was actually the Demios project, which started in 2102. It could have started a lot earlier, but Fashida and Kearney were kind of laughed out when they proposed the theories behind the KF drive, which was a little silly because both of them had helped actually make fusion reactors a reality, so you would have thought people would kind of pay attention to them when they're sitting there going, well, hey guys, we've found this possible new way of using the fusion drive and some graphite and punching a hole through space. But yeah, they got laughed out and basically ridiculed. But in the 2102, about that period, 80 years after they published their paper, so they'd better get started because that means they're basically going to have to publish it in the next couple of years. They had their stuff re-looked at, and the Terran Alliance, which was new at that time, it was more the Western Alliance than anything, started the Demios project, and by 2107 the first jump from the nadir point to the nada point of Sol happened. So they went from above the star to below the star, and that was made by first a probe and then by Raymond Beisch. Later in that year, a refitted inner solar system ship called the TAS Pathfinder made the first interstellar jump from Sol to Tor Ceti, and that paved the way for colonisation. A short 9 years later, the TAS Ark delivered the first colonists to New Earth in Tor Ceti, starting the first waves of expansion from Sol. We're going to pause on the thing for a moment to move our mechs. These guys, of course, aren't even in existence yet. They won't be existent until the Terran hegemony actually creates them. about 300 years from this point of time.
Ordnance received.
So, after the TAS's Ark's arrival in Torsetti and the like, basically what happens is a massive colonisation wave. So we see ships from corporations, from the government start moving, even little groups like religions who are being persecuted, they start spreading out. And of course the Terran Alliance isn't too happy about this, so they start policing the growing colonies. And in 2122 they create the first military jump ship, the TAS Charger. Now when we talk jump ships here, we're not talking the thin fragile things that we're used to seeing in the 3025 universe. We're talking things more actually along the lines of a hybrid between what is a warship now and a jump ship, because they actually still used to have to come into the systems, because dropships weren't actually invented until about the early 2200s, when the first jump sail is actually made, and that's to offset the hydrogen use, but also to allow them to stay up above the star at the nadir or the nada point, or below the star, and recharge while the dropships come in. By 2223, however, the Terran Alliance undertakes the fourth Grand Survey, as it was called. And they look at how many colonies exist, and it's well above 600 worlds in a sphere around Sol. So they've got this giant bubble of space and colonies, and corporations such as the Ryan Ice Cartels and even the what will become the fledgling great houses are forming in this period. However, Terra is kind of a little pressed for resources. They're a little hungry for various forms of minerals and other wealth that the colonies have. Colonies rely on them for a lot of high technology at this point, while in return the colonies are meant to send back a lot of their resources to Terra. However, in 2236, it all starts to go to pot, because Terra's basically been asking for more and more resources from its colonies. And this is a period before the hyperpulse generator, which won't even actually be invented until the Star League era. So the entire Age of War was fought with the pony system, where jump ships took messages from one system to another. And Terra's been trying to police 600 worlds this way. In 2236, however, the colonies get a little sick of it. They're tired of the excess, they're tired of the demands from people that in some cases are up to 200 light years away, if not further. And they kind of revolt, or at least some of them do. Now, in response to this, the Terran Alliance sends the Marines. The Colonial Marines are sent out by the Terran Alliance to suppress the revolts. And within 18 months have basically been sent packing. So, because of this, the Alliance has started to ask for more food and more materials from the colonies that are still loyal, and more of these revolt. Facing what they believe is an expanding rebellion and pure chaos on their part. The party that was in power gets thrown out, and the isolationist party, or the Liberal Party as it was, comes into power, and they do what is called the Demarcation Act. And the Demarcation Act basically goes through and says, well, if you're beyond 30 light years from Sol, or one jump, you're on your own. Goodbye. And this left a lot of colonies that were still loyal, and a lot that relied on terror to themselves. But at the same time as this happens, the alliance itself starts to fall apart. So outside the alliance now, you have colonies that have been left on their own. If you're outside that 30 light year mark, you are on your own. They don't care. And to give a quick example of what that 30 light year mark looks like, we'll quickly in a moment pull up another image and take a look at it. So if we jump over to, if I pull up my Battletech maps here and pull up the inner sphere and 2575, which is the birth of the Star League. And now I'm going to quickly, hopefully, get this to play nice and let me share the map. So this is the inner sphere thing. This is what will become the Terran hegemony. But at the time of the Terran Alliance pulling the borders in, we've basically got this little circle in that comes around just to about Northwind and around. It's only about 50 systems, if that, at the time. And they've told everybody else, so a chunk of all these systems, to basically go it alone. So what happens? Well, we see the start and the formation of the successor houses. It's during this period of time that we see the Covenant of New Avalon form. We see the Tamar Pack that'll become the Lyrian Commonwealth. It had actually started to form beforehand. Things like the Republic of Marak, the Federation of Oronti, the Tiknoff Grand Union, San Ives, Sana, Capellian Hegemony, Federation of Sky, the Taurian Concordant, and a whole bunch more. These all form over the decades to come from this period. The first to actually really form, though, into what we kind of know it, is a mix between the Capellan state, because it's hard to pick which one you call it by at this point, because it was the hegemony, then the commonality, and then finally became the Confederation as we know it now. But they clashed with the Free Worlds League at the time, and started the first war, which was about... That actually started in and around 2393, somewhere around there. That's when the Age of War starts. But during that period, of course, we also have inside the Terran Alliance things going to pot. They're arguing and fighting, and in amongst the Navy, a admiral who will become a rather famous name, McKenna, decides he's had enough and is tired of the politicians basically being morons, and takes the first true naval battleship, and brings it over, so does a show of force and basically tells the government to get out. And we see the birth of the Terran hegemony. So that's what's going on inside, but they're still researching new technologies and all that. And the interesting part about the entire Age of War is, despite what is about to happen and how bad things actually get, and I mean, this is a level of fighting that's not seen again until the first succession wars, or possibly the reunification wars. But the states are pounding themselves to death. But despite all that, unlike in the succession wars where we see technology stagnate and in some cases go backwards, during the Age of War, technology continued to progress. The first major incidents, like I said, were between the Capellans and the the Capellans and the Free World League. The events that caused the formation of the Terran Alliance happened in 2316, when James McKenna seized control and actually forms it. And just to give a quick rundown on the dates that things happened, so the Rimworld's Republic, who we all know for creating Amorous, is formed in 2250. It's one of the few states at this time that no longer exists, having been subsumed into what is now the Illyrian Alliance, of course. In 2215, 2216, the Terran Hegemony gets formed. In 2317, we see the formation of the Federated Suns. 19 sees the formation of the Draconis Combine. 35 sees the formation of the Taurian Concordant. 41, the Illyrian Commonwealth. 66, the Capellan Confederation. And the Age of War truly begins with the First Andurian War in 2398. It'll last for about 6 years or so, and sees rather brutal fighting between the two houses, even though the Federated Suns send peacekeepers. It doesn't tend to go too well. Basically, everything goes to pot because it was it was like putting a match to a powder keg. And of course, at the same time as this, the hegemony starts to spread its muscles and want some of the systems that it gave up back. And
I'm here.
War breaks out between all the states.
Regain footing. Good to go.
The war itself, though, was pretty much total war at this point, but people had been fairly, how do we put it? Well, that civilians hadn't been truly hammered, but one event would change all that, and that event was caused actually by the Free Worlds League. They invaded the Capellan Commonwealth on a small planet called Tinterville, and their orders were basically to take the planet. If somebody had a rifle or you had any suspect of somebody being a enemy combatant, kill them. And it led to atrocities on a level that had not been seen to that point in the Age of War. They'd been seen on Terror before, because more people actually died in World War II than would die in the entire Age of War. But thousands of civilians are killed, hospitals are attacked, and things get that bad that the Capellan leader at the time, who is Alicia Leo, calls for the formation of what will become the Ares Convention. The Chancellor, doesn't want civilians ever facing that type of attack again. So she calls for what we know of as the Ares Convention, in an attempt to actually stop war. It actually has the opposite effect, but we'll go into that more next time. Anyway, this has been a somewhat mixed part 2 of the history of Battletech for the first part of the Age of War up until the formation of the Ares Conventions. My name's Rob, thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.